Hi. No. Hi.
Hi, we're going to do a short video on cross multiplying. Cross multiplying is a math strategy where you solve for an unknown. An unknown is always represented by a variable, okay, which is a letter. Cross multiplying is not multiplying fractions, okay? Here we have 1/2 times 3/6. When you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 6 is 12. That is multiplying fractions. When you cross multiply, instead of seeing a multiplication symbol, you're going to see an equal sign. This is because both of these fractions are going to be the exact same amount. They are going to equal one another. So you have a numerator cross multiplied with the denominator, and then the numerator cross multiplied with the other denominator. So, for instance, here we have 1/2 equals 3/6. To cross multiply, we cross multiply the first numerator with the opposite denominator. 1 times 6 is 6. Then we have this numerator, and we're going to cross multiply it with the other denominator. 3 times 2 is 6. And as you can see, 1/2 and 3/6 definitely are the same amount.
Isn't that cool?
6 equals 6.
That happens that way because if they're not equal, you're never going to have these products equal to each other. So they have to be equivalent. That's why cross multiplying works, the strategy that we're trying to briefly talk about today. And when are we going to use cross multiplying? Could be doing rates, ratios, or proportions. It'll work really good when we have that one unknown, that variable, to solve. And so putting this together, it's the strategy to solve those three different options or things that you have in math: rates, ratios, or proportions. So a simple way that I'm going to show, and then Mrs. Hall's going to also show a second process to do cross multiplying, is that if you have two steps, and step one is taking those products, and we'll briefly put this back up here. 1/2 is equal to, and let's say the 3 is missing. There's my variable. So I'm going to try to solve this. And yes, that's a very simple problem, but this is the foundation, so it can be easy no matter what numbers you have that you're trying to process. So step one says, I'm going to, as Mrs. Hall said, we're going to cross over diagonally, opposite numerator to denominator, and multiply those together. So in this case, I'm going to multiply for step one, opposite numerator and denominator. One times 6. So that would give me an answer of 6. Now, what am I going to do with that 6 is step 2. And that is taking that product, which is 6 in this case, and divide it by the third number available. And why I don't say by the numerator or denominator, this variable does not have to be in just that position. It could be down here as the denominator, which makes things different here on these steps. So if that third number that's available, I've already used 1 and 6, now I want to use the 2. It's the third number available, so I am going to say 6 divided by 2 then becomes the answer of 3 that we said earlier. 1/2 equals 3/6. There you go. It's solved then for that variable. So step one, multiply the two numbers that are available diagonally, and then divide by the third number to get your answer. That's one process. Now Mrs. Hall will explain through equation solving, you can do the same thing and get the same answer.
So again, we have 1/2 equals n over 6. When we're solving equations, we have to solve for the variable to get our solution. In order to solve for the variable, we have to get it by itself to see what it equals. So, again, we're going to cross multiply numerator with the opposite denominator. 1 times 6 is 6. Put our equal sign in, because we've got to keep our equation balanced. We don't want one side heavier than the other. And we're going to multiply 2 times n. 2 times n gives us 2n. We now have a coefficient, which is this number in front of the variable, and a variable. When you see a coefficient and a variable side by side, it means to multiply those two things. So, if I want to get that n by itself, then I'm going to have to do the opposite. I'm going to have to divide. Watch how this works. So I'm going to divide this side by 2. Again, it's an equation. I've got to keep it equal. So what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. I'm also going to divide the 6 by a 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, n. Put my equal sign in there. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 1 times n is n because anything times 1 is itself. So I get n. My n is now by itself, equals 3. Just as we started out with from the beginning.
So as you can see, there's two different ways to solve or use cross-multiplying to solve rates, ratios, or proportions. And if you want examples, we sure can do that in class with you. But this should be a good video to always go back if I'm confused on cross-multiplying, the way to get there to solve those possible variables that you want to find.
Happy cross multiplying!